Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. This is your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. Today, I'm here with Luis Garza. Oh, no, yeah, Garcia, Luis Garcia from beautiful, he said, the happiest place on earth. And that is where? Luis, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Orlando, Florida, the happiest place on earth.
Orlando, Florida, the happiest place on earth. Now, Luis Garcia, he's a seasoned international executive with over 25 years of experience in technology, digital media, and education. And he specializes in driving new ventures and products to rapid growth by building effective teams that harnesses innovation, technology, and creativity to solve complex problems. Now, Luis is the president at Pete. So Luis, before we get into Pete, give us a little background. Who is Luis Garcia?
Oh man, what I like to do, what I strive the most is to creating new products and creating new ventures. Is what I enjoy the most doing. And I am from Latin America originally, and I migrated to the U.S. very long, like 30 years ago. And but most of my career has been in technology and education, always creating products and on trying to improve learning.
So you got to tell me, what was, you mentioned your focus is on kind of the scale in business. What was your first business?
My first scale business was an online university, and I was hired by one of my alma maters, called Full Sail University, and to create an online university. And I actually came from the .com world, so didn't really know much about learning. And but I got the job because they thought an online university was a website and I could create websites. And and I was an alumni, so there was an affinity there. And but as an engineer, you run pilots and you learn. And so it took me a couple years to understand how learning online took place and what we needed to do as an institution, and to have a legitimate online version of our institution. And so we started out with 13 students, and the university had 5,000 students already in their campus. And it took us only 2 years to get to that student population. And then a few more years after that, we had over 12,000 students, degree-seeking students in our university, which to get there, you have to launch, a lot of programs. We launched over 35 degree programs. We hire over 1,000 people. And those 12,000 degree-seeking students amount to about a business of $180 million top line annually.
Wow.
So I would say that still today, the most scale business I have created and run.
Nice. And so that was primarily like an online education, right?
Correct.
Now, how did that, tell us about what you're currently doing now with Pete.
Yes. So in digital education, there's a lot of challenges that we have to overcome to make that effective. And but it also created some new problems. And so I'm very familiar with those, having been in digital education for a couple of decades now. One of those problems is the educational materials themselves had to be very, very strong. And if you think about your time in a classroom, if the person in front of you was a good expert and know what they were talking about, and there was a good communicator, they knew how to communicate that expertise, regardless of whether they had a good PowerPoint behind them and a good support materials for your learning, you felt that you were educated. But once you take that instructor out of the equation, the instructional materials actually do the teaching. And creating effective educational materials is really hard. So back then, I had to create a department just for that. And so people that with content creators, designers, and all these things in order to create content that will be in essence effective teachers. So that's one problem that is very difficult to overcome. And the second problem is that in the online learning environment, it's very hard to evaluate learning. So how do you know the person actually learned? And in the classroom, you can do tests, and on tests is a very poor way of evaluating learning. But you can do a one-on-one teacher-student evaluation, which is actually quite effective but non-scalable. And in a digital world, the structure to students are much larger. So doing evaluation of learning at scale has been impossible so far. So that's the two problems that I wanted to be able to solve. So when I left the university, and I'm partnered with my partner at Pete, who came, he has exited a fintech unicorn here in Orlando, and he had this kind of the same problem in his own company. As it was scaling, they needed to rapidly train people, and then he realized how hard it was to create materials and how hard it was to evaluate their learning. And so he contacted me, and he thought maybe AI can help with this problem. So he, because I'm an expert in that, he asked me, do you think that we can use generative AI for that? And I was like, yes. Absolutely, we can. And he was thinking more in the content creation portion, but then I brought up the evaluation of learning. It's like, if we can do one-on-one engagement for learning, we will have solved a very difficult problem in learning. And so that's what we did. And that's what we do at P today, is that we have tools for companies to create the learning materials and to evaluate the learning of their employees when they're doing work for free.
One of the things you mentioned is very difficult with the learning piece is actually creating a scalable learning metrics. Like, how well is the learning going? And folks, this is true for me. The Shades of Entrepreneurship, I really look at it as an educational podcast. So please go subscribe at the Shades of E. Go check out the blog post, and I really hope you find some educational value in it. But now, take me through the process of how do you create when you think of learning, you think of creating matrix. What kind of matrix can you create? So if I'm a teacher and I'm trying to create something from scratch, what metrics should I be thinking about implementing in order for me to ensure that the education I'm providing is continuing to be valuable and also relatively in line with what the learner needs?
But yeah, so that's a great question. And historically, we have equated learning with time. And I say, okay, this is a course that is an hour or is 4 months. And we kind of assume that if you sit through that time and do the work, that then you will have learned. And it's possible that some things you did learn, but it's also very possible some things you did not learn. So it starts with the design of the course. You say, okay, what are the learning outcomes? It's called. So what are the things that a person had to have learned and mastered after going through this learning experience? And it's usually 3 to 5, no more than that. And if you're designing the course properly, you're trying to break down those outcomes to get you there. And some of that could be lessons, and some of them could be some other kinds of activity projects, and so on. And then you evaluate the learning at the end. You do what is called assessment. And most of the time it's a test. And so you ask the questions, and if they respond according to a key, you assume they learn. The problem with that is that if you don't ask a question about something, you may not know if they learn. And also the level of learning within the learning outcome may be variable. It may be even though you answer the questions correctly, it may be that you actually don't master the material. So we come from a world where the time in the learning materials or the learning experience is fixed, but the outcome of the learning is variable. So what we want is to flip that and make sure that the learning is fixed. Everybody learns exactly the same. And the time is variable, because some people may take a long time and some people may not take a long time. So to answer your question, you want to make sure that your learning outcomes is what you measured. And then you have evaluations that will get you to those particular learning outcomes. And the way we're doing at Pete is that we have a different tools for different things. Now, you can do a test, a knowledge check inside a lesson, just to make sure you're paying attention and you can following it, and that's very valid. If the material is simple enough, a quiz will do. But sometimes you really need to engage with a learner, talk about it, ask more questions, ask the second question, ask the third question based on the answer, and continue to go deeper. If you ever gone through a verbal evaluation, that's how it works. And then you can really do exhaustive evaluation of the learning. So what we do is that once we have that knowledge base that we have to create in order to do materials, then we have simulations that we can program against those and against the learning outcomes. So now the learner goes into a chatbot conversation, and the chatbot could be acting as a customer if you perhaps are training for customer success, or you can act as a process if you're trying to teach him a step-by-step thing or something, or you can act as an instructor, and or you can act as an expert, and then you reverse it because the learner will ask the questions instead of being asked the questions back.
You know, I got to tell you, the generative AI kind of learning is very unique. In fact, one of the things, you know, folks that listen to the show often, you know, you guys know I'm non-founder or a co-founder of the nonprofit Latino Founders. And our goal here in the state of Oregon is to help scale 100 Latino businesses to $1 million recurring revenue in 5 years. And one of the entrepreneurs that actually recently came through had a generative AI kind of app. And essentially what it would help you do is identify your qualities as a leader, right? To determine, are you one of those leaders? Are you more of a doer? Are you more of a, you know, just give me a task and I'll do it? And so it kind of allows you, so this one specifically was actually for employees, kind of similar to what Luis is mentioning, you know, so an employer could actually give it to employees and help during that interview process when kind of determine, hey, you know, who is this person and are they going to be a good fit for our team? Because one thing Luis also mentioned is the cost of training new employees is astronomical, right? When you hire a new employee, it's quite a bit of money. And even in the recruiting process, to go through the hiring process, identifying people for the interview panel, getting the whole interview going. I mean, it's quite a lengthy process. And essentially, this kind of allows you to kind of minimize your overhead costs, correct?
That's absolutely correct. The cost of training is, some people don't like to think about it. It's like, well, how much can it be? So I usually give examples. I had a position at the university that it was for advising aspirants, students coming into the university in their financial aid. And financial aid is very complicated and it's super regulated. So it took us 2 to 3 months of training before that person could actually get on the phone and properly advise a new student coming in. That's real money.
Yeah.
And that 3 months of salary with no return is real. If you can cut that in half, if you can cut that in 2/3, you're talking about huge. I mean, it's very tangible. And so with tool like ours, and it's very easy to decrease that length. You also mentioned that's without the cost of hiring.
Yeah.
And because today, and I have this conversation a lot with other founders, hiring is harder than ever.
Oh yeah.
We thought that because of new technologies, you can get now applicants from all over. Well, great. I opened a position the other day, 200 applicants within 2 hours. That's a very costly problem.
Yes, it
because
very
I
is.
need now to read 200 resumes, and that's a lot of my time that I don't have. And so I started employing AI tools to help actually get through those. And it's terrible as an applicant that is the case, but that's the world that we're living in.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's kind of funny, Luis, you mentioned that. I was literally upstairs about an hour ago talking to my wife about our nonprofit. Again, Latino Founders, check it out, folks, latinofounder.com. We opened up a business accelerator, a manager role. So to help us with the business accelerator program, the pitch Latino competitions. And we had 90 applicants for a part-time position. And it was absolutely astounding. And I'm like, my wife was like, oh, that's great. I'm like, yeah, but now I have to go through 90 applications. Like my goodness, you know, folks, again, if you listen to the show often, you know, I got the podcast, right? I also own Swag for my brand. So again, it's a company for those businesses or entrepreneurs that are interested in essentially elevating their brand with unique styles. So we are able to create custom merchandise for you. Go check it out at swagformybrand.com. But It's like, I just don't have the time. So it's kind of nice to see how it's starting to take shape. Now, what would you say as we're starting to look at the future? Because I think obviously, if you look across the board, artificial intelligence, no matter what, it's here, right? It's here to stay, and it's only going to continue to be more and more. In your perspective, what is the role of generative AI in the workplace learning?
Well, for us, it's at the center of the tools that we build, right? We use generative AI in uh, uh, to absorb the information of the expertise. And because in order to do education, you got to be able to translate your expertise into learning.
Yep.
And right, and being an expert is not enough. You got to be able to translate that into training materials, into evaluation of learning, into activities and things like that. And so a process that used to take, I'll give you a small example. The first thing that you do when you're creating a course is that you gotta go get your source material, okay, all the things that your research, right, all those books behind you, and then you gotta be able to synthesize that into an outline, right? Okay, I'm gonna do this in 4 modules, and each module is gonna have these things inside. That process I've seen it take from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, because you gotta do all 3, right? And we do it in 30 seconds.
Unbelievable. Like folks, I love, Luis, what you're saying, because it's true. Like, you can be an expert in anything, but if you're unable to break that down, that the expertise level of the information that you know, and if you are unable to break it down to a point a kindergarten could know, then you're really not an expert. And that's the difference between being an expert and being a trainer of the expert, like being a SME, right? A subject matter expert, for those that may not know that that acronym. And really, the difficulty of that is, and this is where I love actually the training piece. I, to this day, use a thesaurus. And the reason I use a thesaurus is because I can get essentially a sentence or a phrase or a paragraph down to one word, because that one word kind of embodies everything that either that sentence or that statement I was going to say has. And that's exactly what Luis is saying, essentially, is getting all of that expertise information and then drilling it down to 1 word or 2 words or 3 words, something very simple, something easy to absorb. Now, what would you say for folks out there right now, right? They got a lot of small businesses. How do you begin to incorporate generative AI into your business?
So first and foremost, I think for entrepreneurs or not, anybody working today, and have to start by admitting that it's here, just like you did a few minutes ago. So the question is not to ask yourself, is AI gonna affect my work or affect my industry or my company? And the question is how it's going to do it, because it's definitely going to do it. So I tell a lot of folks the way that I started with generative AI, and which is the first time that I used, and I started very early. I'm an early adopter of a lot of things, and type a couple questions. I thought of it as a search engine mostly, and didn't give me an accurate answer. So okay, I don't know what the hype is, and I walked away. And then I talked to more people, and I said, well, I'm missing something. And but what I did was I went on and bought myself a subscription. Now I'm paying $20 a month, so I definitely going to incorporate this into my life. And then I forced myself to use it every single day in things that I never even thought about. What I found the most value those days, and I recommend a lot of people to do it, is to use it as a sounding board to help you think. And those days I was fractioning for different startups, and I do my best thinking in the morning, right? You're fresh, you have less cognitive load, so I used to come out with big ideas in the morning. But when you are consulting for other people, but you only have one morning, and sometimes you have to, have the same level in the afternoon or late in the afternoon. And I needed to create a go-to-market plan for this company. And truth to be told, never actually done a go-to-market plan for that kind of company. And so usually I would have to go scout the internet for other go-to-market plans that exist that somebody somehow published, and then see if it applies to what I want to do, and try to make it fit. Instead, I went to one of the agents, and I tell to use different ones. They say, I have this company. This is their business. We're doing this product. I need to create a go-to-market plan. And here's the trick. I didn't ask him to tell me what the plan should be. I asked him, what are the things that a go-to-market plan for this kind of product, for this kind of company, this kind of industry should have? And then it starts, oh, well, a go-to-market plan for those things should have these components. And then, oh, okay. So let's start with the first component. How do you develop the first part? And then I kept it, and now all the cognitive load went away. So he was working with me. And so after a couple hours, I had a pretty good idea what I needed to do. And so my recommendation is people to use it like that first. Even the multimodal now that you can have GPT on your phone, I see a lot of folks starting their day speaking to it. It's like, today I gotta make sure that I accomplish these things, and I help you think about your day. And by the end of that conversation, you have a pretty structured day. And so that's a very good way to incorporate it into your world, and use it as your assistant, because it really is something that helps you accelerate what you do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to your point, Luis, people need to understand, AI actually has been around for a very, very long time. So folks,
50 years.
50 years now. Look at, again, folks, if you think about the cell phone and you're doing your texts, right? When your text starts to come up, that's artificial intelligence. It's basically, right? If you're on Word document and you misspell a word, right? Misspelling of words and it goes through, that's AI. Right. All of these things are artificial intelligence working with you. And Luis, I really like what you're pointing out is use it as a sounding board. Folks, if you go check out theshadesofE.com right now, and while you're there, go ahead and subscribe. But if you check out my website right now, what I recently did was I asked AI, I was like, hey, I need you to help site mapping my website. I want the marketing funnel to work a lot better on my website. I want people to not get lost, and I don't want people to drop off pages. And then also I want some understanding of color guides. So same thing I did with a swag for my brand. So if you go to swag for my brand, all of those colors are very specific because I'm asking, hey, what colors are poppy, innovation, but also trustworthy? So when you think about the psychology of colors, folks, you'll start to realize like AT&T and Dell, those folks have blue. Why? Well, they want to be considered loyalists, right? Trustworthy. That's where the blue comes from. Target. It's going to be red. Why? Well, because red is fun and shopping, right? Purple is a different color. If you look at the news, most of them are black and white because, again, that's kind of like the neutral zone, right? Same with the Shades of Entrepreneurship, kind of black and white. And so you start to think about all these things, but the beauty of AI, it kind of sets you, it basically takes out all the static and gives you like the bullet points, the summaries of these. Now, it's not going to tell you what to do, and it's not going to do it for you. Granted, that you can probably, you can write an essay with AI. However, there's also softwares that kind of quickly identify that that's written by AI, right? Same with your blog posts. You go do a AI generated blog post and continue to do that. Google's going to notice it's just AI. It's not your actual content. And so you'll start to scale down. So it's just kind of be mindful of that when you do use AI. Make sure you use it as a sounding board and don't make it sure it is used as don't repurpose it as your own content, essentially, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you another tip for entrepreneurs out there. Sales is very, very important for everyone. There's no sales, there's no business. And many times you have to do discovery calls, right? You go into a short call with somebody, try to find out about their business, and then try to find out if your solution is going to fit what they're looking for. And so there should be 5, 6 questions, 7 questions that you got to make sure that you come out of that discovery call, right? And you can create a customer profile, so then later you know how to target that customer. And I use a lot of AI for that. I write my notes from my call. Sometimes you can use AI to actually take the notes for you. I actually don't like that because the AI can pick up what I say, but not what I think. I mean, my notes, I like to write down also what I think. But then I go to AI and say, okay, would you please answer this set of questions with these notes that I have right here? And they just throw it out there, and which in 5 seconds, I'll have the question and answer, question and answer, question and answer. I'll take that into the CRM, customer profile done.
I love
Very
that.
simple.
I love it. And then folks, that's when you begin to like, I love this concept because now I'm going to start stealing your concept, Luis, because what I'm thinking with right now with the nonprofit, as I'm beginning to build out the marketing funnel, right? I'm thinking of marketing segmentation, right? So for example, if my philanthropists, the people that donate money to the nonprofit, they're going to be getting a different message than the alumni, individuals that have participated in any of the accelerator or the pitch competitions. But each one of those are going to get a completely different communication than the people that are interested in just volunteering. Right. And so it's really trying to identify what's of value to each one of those segments and making sure that your marketing is in line with those values, because the last thing you also want to do is lose people to from subscriptions, because the cost of a new customer is extremely high. And you know, Luis also mentioned it too. Not only that, but new employees, right? Getting a new employee, and it is extremely high. Now, one of the things, Luis, you mentioned too, I was very interested. I really wanted to come back to it, was the go-to-market strategy. One of the things you talked about was asking AI, what does it take to go-to-market strategy? So I would love a little bit of insight from your experience. What was some of the things that you implemented for your go-to-market strategy?
So actually, great question. At Pete, in you had to take this product to market. We were very lucky because we had customers from day one. We started signing up customers with a prototype, and it was no interface, the prompt. I mean, directly, and but somebody that saw the prototype said, you know, I could use that right now. I need some courses delivered, and for one of my customers, this is a person that had a very big state south of you that has an organization to help promote the state, and she was doing some courses for them, and then saw our prototype and immediately gave us a contract. And so with that one contract, we went and told everybody we're doing courses for this, we're using our platform for that. But our first reaction was to use our own networks. You know, we are in an ecosystem of businesses here in Orlando, and we are participants of that ecosystem in events, and we know people. So our first reaction was go to the ecosystem and present it to everybody that will listen. And if you're a participant of your local ecosystem, they will give you half hour for you to show what they have, and some of them will believe in it, even though it's very early. So our first customers were all Orlando based, and people that believed in us, and were able to sign up with a very early stage a product. And but with those, we're able to money because you're showing some product market fit, and that allows us to then bring more resources. And so today, now we have a combination of outbound. So we got salespeople identifying customers within our ICP, and making cold calls every day. That still exists. And we also then now have inbound. So marketing, the digital marketing, ads, and all that with those coming in. And it's about then experimenting with the right messaging, and targeting the right audience, and keeping a cost of acquisition that makes sense for your business. So that's not very different than other technology companies, to be honest. But I think what it is different is that we believed in our local ecosystem first, and use that to get others. So
yeah, I love it. And what would you say is the kind of the crux of the education that Pete provides, or is it kind of business agnostic? It does everything, or is it very specific to one vertical?
No, it's not specific to one vertical. And we have customers from stadiums. You know, one of the early adopters in the Orlando City is our MLS team here, and they were not training their workforce for the game day. You know, so they hired 200 people for every game, right? And they had to help customers and fans. and they receive very little training because it's expensive to train that many people. And with our tool, it became very cost effective to do. And then because we got then the Kia Center, and which is where the Orlando Magic play, say, oh, we got the exact same problem, and so we got them too, and now we're talking to the larger university here that has a big sports operation. So I never thought that that was going to be the kind of organization that will use our tools. But we have those. We have retailers. We have the largest credit union in Central Florida as our customer. We got a logistic company, a fintech company, and it really doesn't matter. But what we found, though, is that the size of the organization is what really matters. And so if you have less than 50 employees, and what really works in those organizations is shadowing, what I call organic learning.
Yeah.
You teach that person teach the next person, and so on. But once you start past 50 employees and you get into the hundreds of employees, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't scale. And but that's usually what they do. They try to turn their experts into trainers and go through that pain. And because they're too small to actually have trainers on staff and instructional designers, just too expensive. And if you try to solve that by licensing from third parties like Coursera and so on, then there's no customization at all. Like I always tell people, you can get a course, but you cannot get your onboarding course, and can't get that from them, and can get your product learning, teaching your sales force how to use your own product. And so what we found is between 100 and 700 employees is where we play really well, where they have the need because of the velocity of training that they require, and the formality of what they do. But they're not big enough to go ahead and spend $500,000 a year in a training department and licensing a platform and all that kind of stuff. So between 100 and 700 employees is where we play.
Let's I want to do two different exercises with you, two different scenarios. Okay. First one, how would you work with an organization? Let's say they're a much larger, like 30,000 employer healthcare. I think the healthcare industry, because one of the things you were mentioning was the difficulty of really training the frontline employees because of not to say that healthcare is a difficult industry, but having the healthcare terminology sometimes is a little bit tricky for some. So how would you work with an organization that does have trainers embedded, but they're more of a hands-on training versus AI training? Have you dealt with anybody like that? And if so, what has been some of the resistance you've seen, and what has been some of the positive attributes that came after it because of that relationship?
Great question, and we are dealing with those. So a few things there. I've been in learning for a very long time. I have yet to meet a learning department or a training department or learning and development, whatever name they have, that say, oh, we're covering everybody, we're good. There is always several groups that are being unattended to. They're getting no training.
Yep.
Or they're doing their own training and they're pretending it's not happening.
Yeah.
So the best way to go with those is that let's use our platform for one of those groups. Let's scale your learning without you having to do it. And let's empower them with our tool that is self-sufficient, so they can create, deliver courses, do evaluation of learning, all of it by themselves. And so that you can scale your learning and go to those places where you normally don't go to because you don't have the capacity. And so that is how we approach them. I call it being part of your learning ecosystem. And because they usually have several platforms, they don't like admitting it, but they do. And they say, no, we have this one platform and we want everybody on it. And then I ask them 2 questions. I disarm it immediately. I say, okay, so that you mean that your accountants are getting the yearly objectives to that? No, they have to use this. Okay, and that means that your IT people are taking cybersecurity through you as well? No, they have to. Okay, so you actually have different platforms. And so you have a learning ecosystem. So let us be part of your learning ecosystem. So that's how we approach it. And the resistance and that you ask is what you will expect. It's like, are we using AI? Am I going to lose my job? And the courses don't look, as visually impactful as we can do when we do it ourselves. And those are the concerns that they have. And we work through them. And we haven't signed a 30,000 people company yet, but I'm sure we will.
And it's
they just take longer.
Yeah, no, and one of the things that's interesting you mentioned is I do feel this sense of ownership when it comes to creating learning modules internally, because of the belief that the quality they're able to provide is much higher. But as a end user, me, the one using the system, personally, I do not care about the bells and whistles and the colors and all that innovative people talking and role playing. Absolutely not. I don't have time for it. I do not care. Get me to the bone, the meat of it. Let's go. That's it. And I think that's where one area our training departments or learning development teams tend to kind of fail a little bit, is because they think that innovation is actually creativity in the sense of animations and fade outs and different fonts. And really, innovation is like, how quickly can you teach me what I need to learn so I can get back to what I'm doing? And Luis, one of the things you mentioned was very interesting too, is this example we're given with 30,000 employees, is it truly is. It seems like there is learning specific for specific subgroups. However, when it gets to like the frontline employees, the people that we actually hire the most, that's where the training begins to kind of falter a bit, right?
And that's the place where you need it the most.
Yep.
Because those folks are the ones that turn over faster, and that's where usually you have a lot of hidden cost.
Correct.
And either because it costs you to retrain them, or you're not training them at all, and they're not giving you their best. And so that's where we have actually shined ourselves, and is in the frontline employees part. And because those are guys that no one wants to invest money into training them.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard. 200 people that in a stadium for a professional team is a season. They're gonna change throughout the season, and so we went from, and they will give them a manual and check them in a list that they receive it and say, well, hopefully they'll read it, to actually taking a course, knowing who took it, knowing that they actually learn it, and then when they finish that, they say, you know what? Now that they know this, how about they also learn a little bit about safety? How about they also learn about a little bit about this? And then so they're actually building more knowledge for those, which is going to translate into exceptional customer service and a much better fan experience for them. So at the cost that we can do that, and because for our platform is a fraction of the cost that actually having a training department, and it makes a lot of sense. So the results they can see very quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of like that old saying, the CEO says, well, what happens if we train them and they leave? And the learning development says, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? Right. Yeah. It's kind of like, you got to make sure there is a return on investment for actually training individuals up. Okay. So that's one scenario, 30,000 foot view one. Mm-hmm. Now another scenario, let's say, maybe a nonprofit, Latino founders, check it out, latinofounder.com. Maybe a nonprofit is looking at establishing or creating their own learning management system to help determine which entrepreneurs are ready to go into an accelerator program versus which entrepreneurs are kind of still at that minimal viable product kind of phase within their career.
Oh, it's actually, you could probably do that with GPT, right? And if you have a decision criteria that you already have, and because you already have heuristics, right? You know, it's like if he has this thing and they have that thing, it's likely more in this group and likely more in that group. So that can be written down into, and then you can ask the applicant to develop answer a particular question and do it in writing, and then all you do have to do is compare one against the others. Make sure that this writing meeting this criteria, and then it will give you, or even give you a scale, and it give me how close they are to this from 0 to 10 or whatever. So that's an easy way to do it. And it's an easy way to actually evaluate new applicants. And I take the job description and write a GPT that takes the resume and compares it against the job description and give me a grade. And so now quickly I can go through a lot of them. But in terms of creating content, you may want to say, okay, instead of doing that, we're gonna take a course. They're gonna take something with them, regardless of where they are. And then at the end of taking these courses, whoever finishes, first of all, I know that is committed.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
and if they don't, they self-qualify out. But if they do, then you'll know more. Not only more about what they know, but you also will level the learning, because one of the biggest problems in education usually is that you get people with different kind of learning, right? They arrive and they may know more of this than that, and the other person will know. So you need to make sure they all know the exact same thing, so you can do what is called in education scaffolding. So if I know they all have the same foundation, I can build on that. So you can also create courses to make sure you're leveling the learning, and so you can create proper scaffolding. Usually a customer like that will work with us together and say, okay, what do you want to achieve? And let's figure out what are the courses that we need to create in order to get there. And then what are the sources that will create those courses? This is very important because it's not pushing a button and getting a course. And this is super, super important. You have to properly train the AI in order to get what you need. I tell folks, anything that has to do with generative AI is about two things. It's about input and refinement. So good input to get good output, good refinement to even get even better output. If you don't have good input, you're gonna get crap output. And if you don't have good refinement, it's not gonna get you there. AI is really good to get you to the 90%, and then you work in the last 10. And because of that, when we sign a new customer, our team co-creates the first 3 courses with the customer. That's to ensure that not only they know how to use the platform, but we get the AI properly trained so that after they're on their own, then they can actually be effective. Also, because we sample the voice of the expert, because it's important for connection that the learner hears from the expert. But we don't want to get them in a microphone taking takes and takes and takes of what to do. Our system not only creates the lessons and what each slide in a lesson should have, but also the narrative of each lesson and the voice narrating each lesson, and with it all automated. And but the voice has to be properly trained too. And sometimes there are acronyms that have to be properly trained because they are specific to the industry. And so all that usually takes us about 2 to 3 courses for that to take place. And so we work with the customer. The onboarding can take a couple months because of that.
All right, Luis, here's what I want. This is exactly what I want for the Latino Founder Nonprofit. We want to build out a learning management system to help us, like you mentioned, individuals that complete that course. We know you're dedicated, right? And this will also help us, as you mentioned, the scaffolding education. Essentially, what we need to determine is where you are on your educational journey within the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because that will also help us determine, are you ready to scale, or should we actually help you set you up with another nonprofit? So for example, if you're here in the Oregon area, if you're kind of tinkering around with an idea and you're trying to figure out, is somebody going to reach in their back pocket and pay you? I'm going to send you over to MISO, the microeconomic team. They're going to help you. They're going to help provide, your proof of concept and your minimum viable product, and they're going to help you with that. Okay. Now that you have your MVP, you have your proof of concept, now you decide, I'm going to turn this into a real business. I need my LLC. I know on branding guidelines and marketing plans. I'm going to send you to your local metropolitan chamber. Okay. Now your chamber is going to help you with your LLCs. They're going to help you with all those things. Okay, now you have an employee, you have a source of revenue, a consistent source of revenue. Now you're ready to scale. That's where I want you to come to Latino Founders. Now, as Luis was saying, one thing I want to do with the learning management system, Luis, is I want to essentially weed out the individuals that aren't committed to the accelerator, because the accelerator is free. It's a 10-week business agnostic accelerator, although next year we're going to go a little deeper in some verticals. But it's essentially, 10-week business agnostic. And the one thing I do not want to do during that program is teaching you how to create a PowerPoint presentation, right? Those baseline things that you should already have. What should be talking about is How do you lower your customer acquisition costs? How do you build out your refer and provide funnel, or your sales and marketing funnel, so you're able to continue to capture those individuals and turn them into a loyal consumer, right? And how do you build up all of these things? And so essentially, what we would like to see eventually is we would like to create a learning management system. Now, mind you, last year we had 32 businesses within our accelerator program, from New Mexico to Nevada, from all up and down the West Coast. So we have quite a large audience for the accelerator. I think this year already, like I mentioned earlier, we had 90 applicants for a part-time position. I mean, we're starting to get pretty growing, and we've only been doing this for about a year. The 501c3 is official for about a year. Now, essentially what we would like to do is we'd like to kind of get to that baseline from the entrepreneurships level, right? To understand where they're at and have that determination, okay, maybe you should go over here, or yes, you should go through the accelerator program, because now we have that baseline, right? Because to Luis's point, the learning management system is only going to get us so far, but that last 10% that Luis was mentioning, right? That's actually a lot of the work's going to come in, because that's where we're going to identify what is your true issue of scaling. Maybe it's operations, maybe it's a vendor contract, maybe it's partnerships, right? It's a bunch of different things. Now, from there, okay, now how do we identify a mentor that aligns with those needs, right? Maybe it's operations, maybe it's financing, maybe it's, fundraising, whatever the case may be. It's those mentors that are really going to kind of help propel you to that next step. Because Luis, as you mentioned, AI can only get you so far, right? And so you kind of need that extra push. And that last extra push for Latino founders specifically is the mentorship program, connected individuals with people that have done it before, their experience to it, like Luis, that are able to take the time and to really kind of walk you through their success stories. Like, Luis was talking about the go-to-market strategy, really kind of walk through that piece. Or if you're doing fundraising, right? What does it mean? The difference in the series. What's the difference between an angel investor versus venture capitalist versus a loan, right? And so really making sure you understand those pieces, those should be all embedded in the learning management system, right? Those are the baseline things.
That's a baseline.
Now, once you get the baseline, after that, now it's like, okay, let's roll up the sleeves and actually do the work, okay? Because now we have your baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. So to execute your idea, you come up with, okay, what are those things that I want everybody to know, and that before they graduate into the mentorship, and so somebody's interested, you say, fine, go over there and take this course, and when you finish, you come back, and if they don't finish and they don't take the course, well, then you didn't waste a second.
Exactly.
And they go and take the course. Not only they have the baseline knowledge that you needed them to have, but you also will have an evaluation on how they did, and also it will tell you that they're committed to it, and now you know how to help them, and so that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and
great use of learning.
Yeah, in the way, I got to admit, we were kind of looking at it, and because we don't want to waste our time, and we don't want to waste the cohort's time, individuals that are truly in it and they're there, they want to be there every week. And so we had been thinking about, maybe we put an application fee. And I'm like, we're nonprofit. We don't really want to, again, kind of going back to who's committed, who's not. I'm like, well, what is a different way? What other strategies can we explore that doesn't involve upfront costs? Right. Because again, entrepreneurs, they're already.
So you wanted to put some friction that shows some skin in the game, right?
Exactly.
So some money, it goes against your principles because you're a non-for-profit. So that's one way to add friction. It's a very effective way to add friction. And but another one could be you have to take the 5 courses, and that's actually, for some people, would be even more friction than the $50 that you can ask them for. And
completely agree.
Because it requires time, and time is very expensive. And but you'll know who's committed and who's not, and they will learn. And you also have an evaluation of how to help them afterwards. And they don't have to go by cohorts. These are self-driven courses, so they can do it whenever they want. And then by the time they're finished, then you say, okay, people that finish by this day will be considered for cohort that starts on this date, and so on.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
I know a lot about this.
No, that's exactly how we're kind of planning it out. Once a quarter, essentially, the learning management system will bring in a new LMS cohort, right? Now, granted, the learning management system will be continuous all year, right? Okay. But then Q2, right, we might go a little bit deeper in like the outdoors and sports, right? Maybe the next quarter going deeper in hardware. Maybe the next quarter we go a little bit deeper in like the food and beverage industry. So identifying one, the LMS system will help us identify individuals within those markets. And if we have enough entrepreneurs to help support a cohort within that vertical, right? That's one. Two, also identifying, like you mentioned, who's going to be really to going through the program versus not. And then what's that baseline level, right? I think the most valuable piece outside of the financial implications that this software can do is really the evaluation piece, understanding like what is the baseline, right? Because there's a lot of things we know, a lot of things we know we don't know, but there's so many things we don't know, and that's where that evaluation kind of helps us, because you can only get so far from an application or an interview, right? And this is just that next little variable to use in determining who's the right fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Great use case.
Now, what is the, future customer? What are we looking at for cost?
I had never been asked for cost in a podcast, but
I know. Well, hey, you got a future customer right here. I'm really thinking. I'm like, hey, how does Latino founders now work with Pete to kind of figure out an LMS system that really benefits our nonprofit?
Right. So what we did is like we have a range, like most SaaS businesses, because it's not the same to talk to an organization of 500 to 700 people than an organization of 100 people, right? And so we have a range, and we do annual contracts that are charged monthly. So in the high end, it could be up to like $24,000 a year, and the lower end it can be $1,000 a month, or $12,000 a year. Although for non-for-profits, I tend to go a little lower, to help out. Less than that is very hard for us to actually make money because of all the onboarding portion is so extensive on our end. The heavy lifting is so high. And so it's like that. It's between 12,000 to 24,000 a year, and it's probably that's why we always said is at least 70, 100 employees, because less than that is just too expensive. It doesn't make sense for them.
Yeah, the complete.
And less than that, they could also just do shadowing. I mean, I literally tell them when I get a company with 12 people, it's like get them in a room and tell them what you know, and and if they're not getting it, do it 3 times a week, and you'll be fine. You don't need to pay us for that.
Yeah. I will say the one thing I caution about shadowing is there's always those 3 types of employees, right? There's the engaged employee, which you want to be shadowed, right? And you want them to be training. There's the RIP employee. And then there's the cave employee. Now the RIP employee is retired in place. This is the person that comes to work. They kind of just the bare minimum, right? Just to get to the retirement. But the difficult ones are the cave employee. They're constantly against virtually everything. They hate the parking, they hate the food, they hate the coworkers, right? And so those individuals also are the ones that actually establish your culture as well. So making sure you have the right people on the bus is important. And so if you have over the 700 employee, I would highly recommend it. In fact, Luis, I'm going to email you after this. I'm going to
absolutely
our executive director and kind of get you on the phone and kind of see how this might work, because again, we are looking at creating this, and I do see the value. And as I already mentioned, it kind of laid out my strategy of what we're trying to do in the next couple of years. And then hopefully we'll scale it nationally and we'll continue to grow, right?
Fantastic.
So Luis, for those people that are interested, maybe want to learn more about you, maybe learn more about Pete, where can you find you online? Where are you at?
Absolutely. We have the easiest URL there is.
This is true.
PETE.com.
I can't even believe you guys got that, to be honest. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a story for another podcast. And so pete.com/podcast. So we can make sure that you came from the podcast. And you can still go to pete.com and go to our contact page and give us your information. We'll call you right back. And you can also go to pete.com/podcast, get great information out of there. And then if you want to know more, give us your contact information. We'll call you right back and love to show you what we can do.
Love it. In fact, folks, easy way to get all this information is go ahead and visit theshadesofE.com and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. We will have this information on the weekly newsletter. Luis will also have a page dedicated to this conversation with transcriptions, audio version, and a video recording of this podcast. For those that are on Patreon, you'll actually get it a week early. So for $5 a month, you can join our Patreon account and you can actually help support the Shades of Entrepreneurship podcast. Other ways is actually by purchasing from our shop. Go ahead and the Shades theShadesofE.com/shop. Check out all the new sweaters, shirts, cups, all the fun stuff that's on there. Luis, thank you so much for this time. I'm really excited. I'm being honest. I'm going to connect with you offline. I would love to kind of hear a little bit more. I think you kind of gave me a lot of things to think about in regards to how do we want to build the LMS system, and what are those boundaries that we really need to hit to make sure, like, okay, this is the level we want them to hit. What does that metrics look like? So really, really cool stuff. Any last words before we go?
No, I just want to thank you and for what you're doing. You know, as a Latino in the U.S. and an entrepreneur, it's just awesome to see how you're giving back, and I hope you're quite successful at it.
Oh,
Very
well,
proud.
thank you so much. I think, to be honest with you, Luis, I think with your help with Pete, I think we'll even be more successful. So I'm looking at continuing to build together. For those folks listening at home, please subscribe to the Shades of E by visiting theshadesofE.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok by visiting @theshadesofE. Thank you, and have a great night.